do things in a thoughtful and thorough way so others can thrive. We need to fill this critical gap because the haves continue to have and the have-nots that continue to have not. So how do we fix that societal gap or chasm? I break down mind share into a few categories. So breaking it down into pleasure, pain, provision, and then purpose. So, what are you actually going to contribute in life? What's your legacy? How are you finding fulfillment? What's really exciting is intent. So it'll kind of look between the lines and give you their interpretation of whether or not someone's intending to move forward. I think getting to that intent tracking piece, I think, is going to be exciting.
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast, where we are here to educate, equip, and inspire people to build extraordinary companies. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now let's get it started. Hey guys, we are back with another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I'm your host today, and in our studio, we have Alex Dripchak. How are you today?
Hey, Rick, thanks so much for having me. Really a pleasure to be on.
So glad to have you, Bill. We've got a variety of topics we're going to jump into.
Man,
so I'm
no shortage.
Right? Where do we want to start? You know what's top of mind for me though? It's the jump that you made. You had a good job. You're working at Oracle. You're doing like all these cool things. And you said, hey, you know what? You know what I think would be cool? Let's start a not-for-profit. You got to tell me this story, man. What happened? What went through your mind?
Yeah. No, it's a good question. So my background has always been serving HR and talent. So that's been in various domains. So always adjacent to it. So always in a sales capacity or client relationship capacity. So it's been Oracle was HR tech, Mercer was everything under the sun for total rewards, benefits, retirement, investments, consulting, etc. And then just basically after that standpoint, I got to meet another gentleman while I was at Mercer, and he was telling me a little bit about what he was focused on for helping college students. So that was the initial kind of idea. And then it was one of those things where I was sitting next to the gentleman and I was just kept typing. And I was like, oh my God, like I had this question. I have this question. I have this. I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I feel like when you start to find your calling or your purpose, and we'll talk a lot about that in today's podcast, when you have that higher purpose, that calling, it's not that you like to do something or you love to do it. It's, I can't imagine not doing it, right? It's a double negative. I was just talking about this with the other person. I don't feel like there's any better way to describe it than using a double negative. I can't not do it. Like it's just one of those types of topics. And I just kept coming back to it. So we started it off in 2020. And kind of morphed the situation. And for me now, it's been a nonprofit as of this year in 2025. So we got the 501c3 charity status in 2025. But yeah, I was like, this isn't about the money for me, right? This is about my God-given purpose and calling in life and making sure I carry out his will and his mission. So how can I reach the most number of people, scale this as best without having those blockades up or people kind of being a little, on guard of, oh, this person's trying to make money. So switched it over to a nonprofit, earlier this year. So that's kind of the genesis, but I'm happy to talk about it any which direction you want to go more.
I got to tell you, I mean, that thing where you're confident, you know where your money's coming from, everything is like clicking. And then you decided to make that left turn and follow, what for all intents and purposes, you're following your gut. You're seeing the things come together and you're saying, okay, this can't be coincidence because I'm assuming because, things are lining up in a certain way. But, there's a big difference between saying, okay, this sounds like a cool idea, and then actually executing it and going all in. And I'd love to hear your thought process around that.
Yeah. So going all in is a big point. So I think, for those that have experienced that purpose or calling, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For those of us for those of the folks that are trying to figure that out right now, there were a number of things, as you said, were lining up. So I saw it. So firsthand, the greatest life lesson I got was when I was 15 years old and I was working a part-time job at a golf course. My dad came to me and said, all right, you need to open up a Roth IRA. And I'm like, what the heck is that? Right. So for those of you that don't know, it's a type of individual retirement account. So once you have earned income, you can start investing. So I started investing at 15. So now 20 years later, I'm like, okay, life looks pretty good because I started early. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, I always hear about people saying, I wish I knew this earlier. I wish education covered this. Like my wife came from an underprivileged background and she went to Columbia, she went to Penn State. These things were not taught, right? I went to Boston College, not taught. I loved my experience there, but it's not the workforce and life preparation that we need. It's more, extended high school or whatever you want to say, some preparation, but just not in the areas that we need. So I was like, we need to fill this critical gap because the haves continue to have, and the have nots that don't have that father figure at home continue to have not. There's just a
Yeah.
lack. So, how do we fix that societal gap or chasm? And for me, I just said, all right, we have to do this. There are 14 courses in our program that are not taught in traditional education, and we need to make sure that students are getting this early enough to prevent that. I wish I knew that earlier, and to prevent that 10, 20, 30, 40 years of lost time where you could have really safeguarded a level of success and comfortability in life.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, so
And
yeah, I just like I don't think it's hard. Obviously, I had great guidance and I took the guidance, but I
yeah.
just want to make sure people have that opportunity for guidance, because it doesn't exist today.
I want to get into the not for profit a little bit more, but what one of the things, well, the what you guys do, but one of the things that comes to mind is a lot of times I've worked with dozens, if not hundreds, of not for profits over the years, and what I'm thinking, or what I want to talk a little bit about, is structuring it. And I'm saying it from an operational perspective. It sounds as though, you put the work in, you built perhaps a business plan or something like that. What was that process, and kind of walk through how deep you went with it?
Yeah, it's a good point. So it is pretty new. So this is as of this summer, that we are now a nonprofit. So we were operating as an LLC for a number of years, switched over. But, with that, some things were already mission, vision, values, things like that might have already been set in stone. But obviously, there's a number of things you need to do to switch over to be a 529. Sorry, 529. That's my financial well being course we teach, 501(c)(3). So yes, there's a number of things that go into that. I actually hired a lawyer to help with kind of doing all of those forms and filling everything out. But it ended up being about a 10-month process from, filling out the first form, going through all the process, questions back from the IRS, and then setting up and getting the official approval as a 501(c)(3) charities. It was about a 10-month process. It's probably about a good 10 forms or so to make sure you're all set up. But yeah, so the business side kind of carried over, very similar for the mission. Obviously, we're just getting paid less, and really relying on donors and grants nowadays. But the form filling was a pretty lengthy process. Does that answer your question?
Well, what about operationally? It's like there's that piece of that, but there's actually running the day to day. There's the responsibility of, making sure that you're not spending more than you're bringing in, the entrepreneurial piece of this, which says, hey, you know what? I see a need. I need to fill it, which is ever evolving, as the market shifts, to talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So just as a point of clarity, this is still a side business for me. So this is my nights and weekends type of deal. So I'm scaling that, as I see fit, or as I would like to keep scaling it as we get more universities involved. But it's not my primary. So I do have a day job. So big reason why I wrote my book that we'll talk about later is try to how to balance everything, right? So, but for this situation operationally, we've got a team of about 63 mentors and advisors. So folks that'll give role based, industry based, they'll give different certification based advice to students. So I'm really, really glad to have that. So I went through basically my top 10% of connections on LinkedIn and asked them to join, and had a pretty good, take up rate, about 35%. So that was exciting. And so those people are on the network. So we have those. I teach most of the programs myself. So I would love to scale beyond myself, but right now I'm still doing most of it. And I have two other people that sometimes will help as well. So, and one primarily for financial well being. So, we've got basically a team of 2 to 3 coaches, the 63 mentors and advisors. So, from an operational perspective, that's who we have kind of doing the work, so to speak. And then what we're seeking, it's been a lot of grants, donors. So, there's some state programs that work really well. And then there's also working directly with institutions.
Very nice, very nice. So tell us what we're doing, what the mission is, and what you hope to accomplish. What's the change you want to see in the world?
Yeah, so I think the change for me is making sure that people have these what I call life enhancing or life changing skills available to them before the age of 22. Really, ideally at age 18, but some things might be a little bit easier once you're entering the workforce as opposed to just once you become 18. So financial well being is really for any age, especially once you become 18. Some of the things around offer letter review, interview skills, presentation skills gear a little bit more towards the juniors and seniors of the audience, but things like networking, we're also teaching. So I don't know if you can see this list behind me, but it lays them all out: persuasion, negotiation, meta learning, which is a fascinating like how to memorize anything technique that the ancient bards and scholars used to use in Greece.
Yeah,
So really fascinating topic. I could spend half an hour just talking about that. But yeah, so storytelling, networking is our biggest one. How to actually cold network, know, like, trust, and how to respect that process. and how to build repeatable skills and offer reciprocity. So that's probably my favorite course in addition to the financial well-being. But yeah, so we're also teaching career pathing. I mentioned interview and presentation skills, emotional intelligence, and then, the one that's probably the biggest that we'll talk about is productivity, peak performance, and purpose. Say that 5 times fast, right? Productivity, peak performance, and purpose. A lot of P's, but that's what the book is centered around. That's coming out next month.
Excited for you. Excited for you. This sounds absolutely fantastic. One of the conversations that comes up in my world a lot is the storytelling. Is that one of your topics, or do you have another mentor that talks about that?
Yeah, no, we I cover storytelling as well. So I think that there's some amazing stats that talk about stories are 12 times more memorable than facts and figures. So just the way to connect with people, like even right now, maybe you missed a few of the topics that I just talked about, but you might remember the golf course story, right? When I first got my first job and the advice I got from my dad, right? So it's a way to bring things to life, and it just helps people visually navigate in their head. Like they can picture everything and watch it like a movie when you tell a story. So we talk about the storytelling arc, and we talk about how to set things up and construct them for maximal efficacy. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about what you're doing with storytelling.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, a lot of this is around conversations. One of the big things for me right now is I see a lot of people that do the same thing. I would go into a networking meeting, and there's like 15 people around the table. 13 of them are consultants that help, business growth, and I'm just like, you know what, this isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, right.
And so the story about it, the story about why, the story about what the driver are, who you're helping, who you're serving, et cetera, et cetera. These are the things that help differentiate, when you're sitting around the table. And it's the same thing I'm teaching my clients. So I work with my clients, especially like some of the smaller ones. And it's like, look, it's like you're selling the same thing that the guy down the street is selling. What makes you different? And it's the story a lot of times that makes us different. It's the story that people connect with and remember, as
It's
you
the why
said.
too. It's your why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So I really enjoy that work. I enjoy that work. So kudos to you. Kudos to you. You know what? I want to switch gears real quick. I want to jump into some of your work with AI. So we've got a lot of things happening with AI. I don't know if at the time of recording, I got up this morning and ChatGPT was offline because Cloudflare was down, and that was interesting because that kind of interrupted my day a little bit. I'd love to hear your thoughts on where we are with AI as far as like adoption and how businesses and even how individuals are starting to really take advantage of it in a great way.
Yeah. So I think we're at an interesting place in time where I see some people still stuck at the starting line. They're worried about ethical reasons. They're worried about productivity. There are certain challenges or replacement, things like that, and they're just not necessarily adopting. And so I see a good number of those folks in some of the industries that I serve. But then I also see on the other side of the house where we're moving into a category where it's not just AI doing the easy tasks. It's starting to create, that generate the Gen AI generative AI is starting to become more impactful. So I've seen that myself. So I've been advising an AI company for about 4 years now. And just seeing, so we don't have our own large language model, but so just seeing, the advancements in BARD and different things like ChatGPT and where that's come in the last release. So as a writer, I've always kind of said, all right, I can tell this is AI. I see a lot of the buzzwords, operational efficiencies and effectiveness. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's consultant speak, but it was kind of like, all right, they're not telling me much here. There's not a lot of substance here. But now I've seen some creativity in AI, some tagline abilities, just using it in my day job, and I was just pretty impressed with what it can do. And then as far as streamlining information, so I feel like we've been at a stage where the last couple of years AI has been good at summarization, next steps, action items coming out of a call. So
Hmm.
from that transcription, conversational intelligence, I feel like it's done pretty well there. But now I feel like we're getting into, okay, write me this brief or this email, or, can you position for me a persuasive email to try to win over this client? And the head user would be CHRO, and we're looking for them to buy by November 26th or something, right? So you can get very specific with it and really watch it work pretty well. So I've been pretty impressed with it, where we're kind of turning into AI as a summarization tool that is the replacement of some of the more menial or some of the more humdrum, doldrum, I call them, tasks, into now actually some of the things that are creativity, innovation based. So I'm curious to see how that goes. And I'm curious to see in 2 years from now if people are still going to be buying books. I really hope you do as an author,
Well,
but it's progressing, I think, at a pretty quick rate.
it really is. It really is. What kind of red flags are you seeing? What would you recommend to business owners that we'll say they're midstream. They're starting to use ChatGPT or whatever for writing some of their emails, as you said, and some briefs and that sort of thing. What are you seeing as things they need to be careful about?
I think there's a propensity to be overly reliant upon AI. It's kind of like, okay, well, this is a great answer. Let's just use the answer. And not, okay, what are the sources? Are we sure this is actually accurate? Because sometimes there's these hallucinations, AI hallucinations that have been talked about. I think resisting that inclination to just be like, copy, paste, like really using it as a tool to either verify information, getting your sources, but not as a replacement for doing the work. So I think that
Mm,
there's some people I see that are really leaning into it and being like, okay, great, I'll give AI this task and I'm gonna go work on this and like almost not even monitor the answer and just send it out. And
yeah.
that's where you can get into some hot water.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think one of the big fives got in trouble with that recently. Tell me something though. What about where people are using AI in app development? So on one hand, we're developing an app that can, I don't know, a dating app, for example, right? And we said we're going to incorporate AI into it to help with the matching. So we're matching on it on more levels than we could do, manually, so to speak. And AI is making those introductions. Do we have that same fear of misinformation in a scenario like that?
You're saying with the dating profile not looking as professional or as
No, no, the information. So what you said is what you had said before is that AI sometimes hallucinates, just comes up with crazy stuff. We're supposed to go back and look at these sources and that sort of thing. So like in an application, I don't know that we really have the ability to do that to that great extent.
Mhm.
And so I'm
Yeah.
wondering if that same red flag exists in that scenario.
Yeah, I think it still does. I think that one of the things I just asked my team, because I've been kind of said, "Oh, you're gonna be," I was told that I was gonna be like an AI super user at our organization because I have a background that's adjacent to the space. Yeah, I still think it's a red flag because I'm like, all right, what's the confidence scoring? Like, how confident are you that this answer is good, it's correct, it's accurate, it's verified by other folks? So I think that extends, everywhere. I think when you said dating profiles, I think that there's a decent number of unfortunate catfish or people that leave certain information out. So I don't know if dating profiles will ever be 100% accurate. So I think that there might be more leeway there than in like you said, the big four or big five that you mentioned earlier, sending something out to their clients or, getting themselves in some trouble. So I think professionally you have to be much more diligent than your personal use, but you should still obviously be extremely careful with how you're using AI, especially if it's any concern about duping people or phishing, things like that.
For sure, for sure. You know where I guess a better example would be like in recruiting. So, people are putting out, job offers or, they're putting out job requests and thousands of people are applying. Lots of people are using AI, to do those applications. We got the AI actually reviewing the applications. And I'm just really curious about the accuracy of the system. Is the system really doing it? Is what's the likelihood or what are the red flags with the system doing its job effectively?
So coming from the applicant tracking space, this is a number of years ago, but I know kind of the behind the scenes of how candidates are screened. So there's certain questions where you can be knocked out of contention or kind of listed as a top candidate, things like that. So I haven't seen AI lately on the back end, but I can tell you, how it used to work as far as just rules based engines for recruiting apps. So I think that yes, I'm concerned there. At the same time, though, how effective are online applications in the first place? I don't know about you, but pretty much every job I've ever gotten has started from networking. So that's one of the things I try to teach to these students is you got to do things authentically, give first, show value first, know, like, trust. People get to know you, they get to like you, and then they get to trust you. That's when they go to bat for you. So you're not, not reaching out and saying, "Hey, Rick, can you get me a job?" So I think people are trying to skip to the end as opposed to building the skill of cold networking and authentic networking. That's really what's going to yield you that job. So I don't mean to divert your question, but in my standpoint, applying online hasn't been effective and it'd probably be increasingly less effective.
Hmm.
And therefore, the in person or the virtual networking is going to become all the more important.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. Good thought. Good thought there. Good thought there. What are you excited about with AI? What do you see coming up that's just like, hey, you know what? I can't wait till this gets here.
Yeah. So the platform that I help with is a real time sales intelligence platform. So it'll look at a conversation like right now, and it would say, okay, if it would say there's a pricing call, and you said, Alex, your price is too expensive. It would say, objection detected. Rick is concerned about the price. Here's your goal in answering him, and here are two or three examples of how to answer that objection. So it pops up with real time intelligence from your sales training, your messaging, your best reps and best managers, et cetera. So you have control over that. So that's really exciting. And we're already seeing sentiment tracking. So it'll say, okay, Rick used an exclamation point. He said, Alex, that's great, right? Exclamation point. So that would be that you're very positive. Or if it was like, yeah, I don't know about this, like, I'm pretty upset about this or whatever. Like, okay, Rick is concerned and worried. So like flag you're in real time the sentiment, and then it'll send you a recap of that. So where we're getting towards is what's really exciting, I think, is intent. So it'll kind of look between the lines and give you their interpretation of whether or not someone's intending to move forward. So that I think is going to be fascinating. There's some people that'll yes you to death and then they don't have the power or authority to move forward, right? So, or conversely, some people ask a lot of questions and it sounds like they have a lot of problems, but they're just being very thorough. So, I think getting to that intent tracking piece, I think is going to be exciting. I think we're at the early stages of it, but seeing how that develops will be even more exciting.
One of the things that I guess goes crosses my mind is, with AI in some ways we're almost allowing our society to like dumb down because we don't have to think as much, we don't have to dig as much, we don't have to be as creative when we're looking for information. We're depending on the tools to come up with the ideas, the taglines, all these things, and then at the same time, there's if everybody has access to the same tools, then finding that competitive advantage and really differentiating seems to be a harder lift. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts on that?
You mean finding competitive advantage like in a virtual environment or also factoring in personal interactions?
Well, in a virtual environment, I
Yeah.
mean, when we're looking at, marketing, go on LinkedIn, we see, 1,000 social media posts, we see the ads, et cetera, et cetera. Slightly different, but they say the same thing. So that elevates because everybody comes up with another tool that says, hey, we can do this better, we can do this better, we can do this better. Here's a great example. So I'm sure you've seen this. So you get an invitation to connect on LinkedIn.
Yep.
You see the message and you think to yourself, I had this exact same message from somebody else a week ago.
Yep. Happens pretty frequently.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the simplest example of that. I mean, what are your thoughts? So, if we look at that, down the road, more people are using it. It's being used more often, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts on how this is going to impact the business world?
Yeah, so I mean, I think where we're at still, at least with not to pick on LinkedIn, I don't think we're there on the pre-baked comments. I don't think I've ever used a pre-baked comment in my life from LinkedIn, and I
I
think
was
it
talking about
shows.
the automation. So people use the CRM automation tools, and they're pumping out, thousands of invitations per month.
Yeah, that's too. I can tell what's done by AI, and I'm like, or I can tell. Obviously, I have a varied background, so when someone says something and they're like, "I'm interested in speaking to you about your sales role at Commence," I'm like, "Okay, you didn't read, right? I'm in a sales role at Bright Horizons, and I'm the founder of Commence. Like, so you didn't read." So there are certain signals I think that are. I'm not sure if they'll ever get to a point where they'll be able to create a custom message that's really, really good. I haven't seen it yet, and I haven't seen
Yeah.
any progress there. And then also with LinkedIn, like with the standard boilerplate comments, when they're like, "This is a fascinating idea, Vanessa or John or whatever," and I'm like, "Okay, you just pressed a button that gave an automated response," as opposed to like, "Hey, I listened to this, and at minute 147, I thought this was really interesting, and here's how I use this, and here's a new idea to consider." Like, I haven't seen anything as far as LinkedIn's concerned that looks as good as maybe ChatGPT does for generative AI. So I think we have more time there to answer your question in short. Will it ever get there? I haven't seen progress.
It's one of those things that I guess in the back of my mind concerns me. It's one of my areas. I really try to work with companies to help them, figure out what that special sauce they have is, and really exploit that. And it's like, you do one of the I had some conversations with guys that do innovation,
Yeah.
and so now, we're able to do prototyping like, that fast. I was actually talking to one of my friends this morning, and it was like, look, you need to make some money by Christmas. Go in ChatGPT, do a business plan, create a business concept that looks like this, and we'll talk about it like in a day or so. We compress these timelines extraordinarily, but everybody has the ability to do that. And so competition looks different because of this. Being able to really stand out in the marketplace looks a lot different than it would 5 years ago, even. I mean, if you think
Yeah.
about it.
No, it really does. I mean, you can create a, like you said, a 20-page pitch deck for an investor or 15-page customer deck in not even 5 minutes, right? So that's one of the interesting parts. But I don't think they do very well on branding. So if you wanted some, slick looking slides in general, you could do that, but it's not going to have all their brand and branding and colors and things like that. So there is something to be said about that. At least I'm not aware of that. I don't see that today. So I think it's going to be extreme attention to detail. So, and I don't know if I don't want to say average person, but if the non AI user will see it, right? They might just say, oh, here's a good presentation. Here's another good presentation. And one took 5 minutes and one took 50 hours. I don't know if that return on investment will be there quite as much. So it's probably going to point to really showcasing your skills more in person and that communication, because that's not going to be replaced by AI. So I think you're right. I think it's going to be putting much more pressure on video meetings and in-person meetings as opposed to sitting behind an email and sending off a deck or an email.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%. It scares me. Somebody sent me an email or something, a message saying that they could do my entire podcast in AI. I was just like, I don't think you can. That's really interesting. So you tempted us with your three P's, one of them being productivity.
Yeah.
Let's jump into that one more time.
There you go. You're showing the pattern interrupt too. Make sure that AI can't replace you, right? We're
There you
not going to
go.
only just talk about AI. We're going to talk about different things. So you cannot be replaced. I love it. Right? So yeah, so productivity, peak performance, purpose. That's what my next book's all about. So funny story there, getting back to storytelling. My first book that I wrote was very similar style, but this one, when it came about, I just took all my presenter notes. So I had all my presenter notes for our presentation course, productivity course. So I was like, these are pretty good, some of these notes. Let me just copy paste them out of Excel into a Word document and see what I have. And it was 9,494 words, so just under 10,000 words. And I said, all right, that's about 1/5 of a book. So I'm like, all right, let's get going. Let's finish the rest of it. So then every day I just had a tracker of how many words I was at. And if I wasn't feeling the inspiration, I would just bullet point ideas or I'd go back and revise. So every day I was doing something between revision, bullet pointing, or actual creating. That was how I got done in 4 months. So I was pretty excited about all that. So, but the genesis as to why I did the book is a lot of people would come up and they would say, hey, I feel like, you always have energy throughout the day. Like, how are you able to do that? How are you able to balance a day job, a foundation, writing, coaching, advising, kind of 5 different areas while moving, I have a 9-month-old here at home. So they're just like, how can you do it all? And now some things obviously are not full time, but I was like, okay, well, there's a number of books that have been really helpful for me and resources. So let me just again put it in this consolidated, curated, collated kind of format and give people 100 practices to help them maximize their life. And that's the next book coming up.
Very nice, very nice. What do you feel like the top three most important um, subjects you breach?
Well, I mean, you have to buy the book in order to read the top three, but I'll give you three that I think are like a little three preview, and I'll call out which numbers I would say that they're. So some of three of the most interesting ones for me. So I'll give you number two. I won't give you number one, but is find and consistently call upon your positive energy source. So for me, that's going to the gym. A lot of people, it's great health wise to go to the gym in the morning, but for me, when I'm trying to maximize my day and have runway for 15, 16 hours, I try to do it right when I'm tired.
Hmm.
If depends on when I get up, your circadian rhythm is different, but a lot of people hit that wall 3, 4 o'clock. So if you can carve out the time, breaking those societal norms is where a lot starts. So sitting at your desk from 9 to 5:30, if you can avoid it, highly suggest it. So I go to the gym usually around like 4 o'clock, 3, 4 o'clock, get my energy again. And then I come back for, my 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock time at night.
Yeah.
So, but that could be meditation for people. That could be for my wife. It's talking to her friends on the phone. She gets a lot of good energy from. People could be doing yoga, whatever it is, walking outside, whatever is your positive energy source. And don't say caffeine, something that's organic and something that's not necessarily blocking your adenosine receptors and telling you that you're not tired, but actually giving you energy. That's what I'm recommending. So sorry for the coffee folks here. But so structuring your day, I think, is a big one. But finding that positive energy source, calling upon it consistently, and making it a habit is one of the big ones for me. As I talk about finding your sanctified or your cleanest, holiest spaces. And I like to use the word holy because it's really that reverence you should have towards your space. So like for me, there's a lot of intentionality behind my books and how they're all stacked. This just ran out, but my little timer. And so like for putting a lot of time and attention and cleanliness towards your space and making sure you can go somewhere that your hit rate for work is 95 plus percent. So what I mean by that for me, like a library, I would go and sit in like two particular chairs. And when I'm in that chair, I'm only working. If I get a call, I get up and I walk. Or if I am sending a text about dinner that night, I'll go sit in another chair. Like I will get extremely laser focused on keeping that space solely dedicated for work. And
Mm.
when you do something like that, it's really, really quite fascinating. So brain will automatically prime you to just get into work mode as opposed to checking your phone, your social media, calling your friends, whatever it is. There's a million different distractions nowadays to battle. So making sure that you have that brain association of this is my space to get things done really gets you into gear. So those are two sanctified spaces, I call them. Finding your energy source. And then another one I was just talking about is shortening your time to actions. So shortening your time to actions and your checkpoints. There's a lot of A to Z thinkers, but there's not as many people focused on B to Y. So there's 26 letters in the alphabet. And I feel like we are disproportionately affected by the first and last. So breaking down those steps and really being vigilant on checking in with yourself. So not just saying, "Oh, I want to do this by some point in time," but obviously smart goals and then shortening that time to action. So if you have a typical every other week cadence, make that every week or make that every 3 days. You'll find that you'll take the action as opposed to procrastinating until that last minute for that typical weekly or biweekly cadence. For example, some of those were shortening your time to action on checkpoints was number 82. Consistently call upon your positive energy source was number 2. I think it's 44, I want to say. Yep. 44 for finding your most productive environment, setups, and locations. So that'll give you on the 100 down to 1 scale. That's 3 little previews for you.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Do you when you're if we were to work on the assumption that, you're maximizing your productivity, where does, and forgive me if this question is too personal, but where does that myth of balance come in for you? Because what I heard you say is like you're getting up early, you're getting to work, you hit the gym midday, and then you're going back to work. How is that working for you,
Yeah.
just in a general sense?
Yeah, so I do talk a lot about burnout in the book too, and sustainability of certain situations. So I'm not working 16 hours a day, but when I have my most focused, energized thinking, I'm putting that towards what Brendon Burchard would call your PQO, your prolific quality output. What do you want to be remembered by in life? What is your purpose in life? So making sure your time alignment is there is one of the big focal points for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, so how do you balance all that is always a little bit of a tricky situation. And one of the things I think it starts with is your mind share. So this is something I've been much more focused on now.
Yeah.
Candidly, right now I'm struggling a little bit with my mind share because, and I'll break it into different categories. But I had a childhood hobby of baseball cards, and I've been selling some of those recently to put some money in towards my son's 529 fund. So the first few months I did great on just selling. But now I'm like, oh, that's a cool card and that's a cool idea. If I just win this bid. So now I'm starting to realize that, yeah, I lose some time and I have some restrictions on my phone for apps where it just cuts off after a certain amount of time. So I can't spend any more time than I've designated on it. So I'd really recommend that. It's an app called ClearSpace. But one of the things I was thinking about, I go, the byproduct or the problem with this is it's stealing my mind share. So as opposed to me thinking about the next idea for the foundation or me thinking about the next idea for my book or how I'm going to help the person I'm coaching or how I'm going to help the tech company I'm advising or how I'm going to win more clients in my day job, I'm spending more time thinking about that auction. I'm spending more time thinking about winning that bid or what's my next bid. So I break down mind share into a few categories. So breaking it down into pleasure. So a hobby would be pleasurable. Pain. So past traumas or current physical pain, etc. So
Yeah.
pleasure, pain, provision. So worrying about bills, finances, things like that. And then purpose. So, what are you actually going to contribute in life? What's your legacy? How are you finding fulfillment? So if you break into those 4 categories, we have about 60,000 thoughts a day on average is what studies show. What percentage is going to each one of those buckets?
You got to be very intentional about that. My gosh.
So, sometimes people might say, oh, well, working 16 hours is really exhausting. And it is. I would suggest having breaks. What are you doing during those breaks? And are those breaks extending too long, whether physically or you're still mentally caught up in them? Well, that's one thing I'm trying to monitor a lot right now. So that would be my advice for how to stay focused is using apps like ClearSpace, making sure your most productive and energized time of day is going towards what's most impactful in your life. Taking breaks where they're needed, 'cause you don't want to just sit in the tired. I know a lot of people that just sit in the tired and they
Yeah.
operate at 40, 50, 60% effectiveness as opposed to re-energizing and getting going again.
What do you do with your I mean, you've got 5 different things going on. What do you do with your, quote unquote intrusive thoughts? And what I mean by that is you have it you're doing a thing and then you have this idea for this other thing that you're working on,
Yeah.
and you know that if you don't do something with it right now, you're going to forget.
Yeah.
How do you manage those?
Uh, do your best to minimize cognitive dissonance is in the top 50. So you're right on mark here, Rick, as far as that noise and how to kind of center it and how to focus it. So yeah, that's one of the tricky ones. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it or try to go around it. But yeah, I think for me, what's easy though is you can just open up your phone. I have probably like 750 different notes, but just adding the notes and then I go back and I strike through when I have the time to actually address them. So they're not just empty notes, but I'll take the note. Some people say write it in a journal. Schedule the distraction is a popular tip from Jim Quick, which I love. So finding time, like, okay, this is distracting me, and I know it's going to keep distracting me. So let me schedule that distraction for 2 p.m. and I'll address it then.
Mm,
So I think there's some certain ways to handle it, but yes, it's going to pop up sometimes in inopportune moments. So making sure that you just jot it down and you kind of just park it as opposed to having it stay obtrusively or intrusively center focus.
I like that. I like that. I like that. Again, I mean, another question along the same space. You're doing 5 different things. Do you get a lot of time to like read or study and learn, or how are you managing that?
Yeah. Well, so the writing and the foundation, reading contributes directly to those. So if I read a good resource, it might end up in the book or it might end up in the program. So that's directly related, time wise. So that's fine. That's manageable for me. And then some of the other things that we're doing, the advising and the coaching are small percentages of my time. And those are more just specific situations now where I've kind of either delegated or declined certain situations if I don't have that bandwidth. So getting comfortable with saying no is another thing that we talk about in the book. But or I talk about in the book, but my publisher I feel like would gets a wee credit there. So yeah. So anyhow, so I think that it's a lot to kind of juggle, but I just want to make sure that people understand I have one full time job and then I kind of have some other side endeavors or the foundation and the book writing are more substantive. The coaching and the advising are less. So five is really maybe more like three or, three and a quarter or something. So time wise, it's a little bit easier to balance.
Cool, cool. And I guess one of my last questions. You talked about purpose more than
Yeah.
once. What is your purpose?
Yeah. So for me, my well, I'll give you my vision statement or how I kind of rule my life or center my life. So it's to do things in a thoughtful and thorough manner so others can thrive. And that's pretty much how I dictate my entire life. So whether it's giving someone a restaurant recommendation, I'll give them a very thorough list, a very curated list. It's my books, it's the foundation, it's how I carry myself in my day job. I'm always looking at how I can do things in a thoughtful and thorough way so others can thrive. So I extend that into the commence vision to fix the societal gap of knowledge. So, in my opinion, it should be action, not knowledge, that makes people successful. Whereas right now, a lot of knowledge is gate kept. Financial well being, to have an advisor, it's 100,000, 500,000, $1 million, right? So, what do you do before then? So, for me, do things in a thoughtful and thorough way so others can thrive, and especially focused on fixing the societal gap, which largely centers around higher education curriculum reform.
Okay. And how did you come up with that? What was the what?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of it, right? So the fact that I go back to 15, the best advice I ever got was from my dad. A lot of people didn't get that advice to open up the retirement account. Seeing a lot of my friends struggling, seeing how much people are taking out in student loans and struggling. I just see a lot of people struggling that I'm like, oh man, if only they had, as I guess you would say, Robert Kiyosaki would say, if only they had a rich dad. So for those of you that are not familiar with Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I think it's the number one financial well-being book of all time, prominently displayed always right behind me. I'm gonna have to catch these suckers, but there we go. So, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he tells in kind of a parable way of advice he got from his rich dad and his poor dad, but it's not quite as exactly what you would think. So, I think when I just put myself in those circumstances, it's like, well, what if other people got this advice earlier? Like, how much different would their lives be?
Yeah,
So, for me, it's like, okay, a lot of things, not everything in life, but a lot of times struggling is optional. And if they only had a great mentor or guide or advisor, whatever you want to call them, sponsor, their life would be demonstrably different. And I'm just kind of like, all right, we could be those people. Like, let's go out there and let's make the world a better place.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Why not take the reins? I love that. So, if you were to give a business owner, a founder, advice on one thing that they could do to contribute to winning, what would that piece of advice be?
One piece of advice to contribute towards winning, you said.
Yes, sir.
Winning
And
more
winning can be
deals, more
defined in
clients.
any way.
Okay. All right. You beat me to it. For me, the piece of advice would be, and I always try to challenge myself to do this more too, is to offer like help, whether it is especially outside of your own domain where you make business or win business, to just try to help somebody, give first, go first, do first. This is number 4 in my first book behind me, 100 Skills of a Successful Sales Professional. And it talks about kind of giving without expectation and not being taken advantage of. If they keep taking and taking, you got to move on. But going first, doing first, giving first, and building that authentic relationship without like, hey, I'm going to give you this report. Okay, we read the report. Okay, you want to do business with me now? So it's taking a longer term approach. There's a fine balance of making sure you're not being taken advantage of and making sure you're adding value authentically, but managing that balance and doing that as opposed to pitching and seeking business and just direct positioning, I think gains people a lot of credibility, respect, and long term advisor related relationships, trusted advisor related relationships.
Very nice, very nice, very nice. I'm reminded, Zig Ziglar used to say, "Earn the right to ask for the sale." I've always loved that. I've always loved that. So tell me something. I'm going to put them in the show notes, but where can people get a copy? Where can they get a copy of your book? And what do we have to look forward to with your upcoming book?
Oh, yeah. Awesome. So people can connect me on LinkedIn, alexdripchak.com. My PR team has that up there. So the book information will be up there. Scribe is the publisher. So excited about that. But it'll be on Barnes and Noble and Amazon and things like that. Excited about the book. Most excited about the book is at the end of it, there is a potential for a $500 quarterly giveaway. So people take their 5 top tips that they're going to implement in their life as to how they're going to contribute towards their purpose or finding their purpose if you don't know what it is just yet, but how you're taking action to make the world a better place, be that change that you want to see in the world. I'm going to be taking folks and giving them out giveaways throughout the next several years. So something to look forward to. There's an incentive to read the book, right? You could potentially win $500, which is not always the case for reading. So I want to encourage people, right, to be making that change in the world. Yeah, that's the goal of the book that I'm most excited about.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Great footprints you're putting out there. Thank you so much for being on the show. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And let me know how I can return the favor, how I can be helping you and your mission and your clients.
I will certainly do that. I will certainly do that. Folks, thank you so much for watching or listening to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. We'll catch you next time.